The day my world crumbled began like any other Tuesday in April. Spring in Connecticut was finally showing itself after a brutal winter, the kind that makes your bones ache when you've crossed the 60-year threshold like I had. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the back porch of the colonial home I'd built with my own two hands 35 years ago, back when Sarah was just learning to walk. The home I'd signed over to my daughter and her husband 3 years prior. The transfer was supposed to be a blessing, a way to help them establish themselves while I downsized to the renovated garage apartment we'd converted specifically for my golden years. I never imagined it would become the weapon they'd use against me. I still remember the weight of the pen in my hand when I signed those papers. How proud I felt to give my only child something substantial, something my late wife Margaret and I had sacrificed for decades to build. Margaret would have approved. She always said family takes care of family. "Morning, Dad." Sarah appeared at the sliding glass door, already dressed for her job at the insurance firm downtown. My daughter had inherited her mother's auburn hair and quick smile, though that smile had grown increasingly rare in recent months. "Morning, sweetheart. Coffee's fresh." I gestured to the pot on the small table between the Adirondack chairs Margaret and I had bought at a craft fair in Vermont 20 years ago. The right one still had the small nick where she dropped it while we were unloading it from the truck. Sarah glanced at her watch, a Cartier that her husband Brian had given her for their 10th anniversary last year. A watch I knew they couldn't afford. "Can't. Running late. Listen, Dad, Brian and I need to talk to you tonight. Dinner at 7. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "Everything okay? Just be there okay?" She didn't wait for a response before rushing back inside. I spent the day at Davis Hardware where I still worked 3 days a week. Not because I needed the money. My pension from 40 years at the electric company was modest but sufficient, but because idle hands make for a restless mind. That's what my father always said before dementia took even that wisdom from him in his final years. Frank Davis, the owner, had been my friend since high school and gave me the job after Margaret passed. "To keep you from becoming a hermit," he'd said. Today he noticed my distraction as I misplaced an order of Phillips head screws. "Earth to Jack," Frank waved a hand in front of my face. "You planning to join us today or what?" "Sorry, Frank, just thinking. Dangerous pastime at our age." He leaned against the counter. "Margaret used to say your thinking face meant trouble." I smiled despite myself. "Sarah and Brian want to talk tonight. Something's up." Frank's expression darkened slightly. He'd never been Brian's biggest fan. Called him all flash, no substance, after meeting him at Sarah's engagement party. "Well, don't borrow trouble. Maybe they're finally having a baby." The thought brightened my mood momentarily. A grandchild had been my and Margaret's dream before pancreatic cancer took her 5 years ago. But something told me this wasn't that kind of news. I was right. Dinner was Brian's idea of cooking, takeout from the overpriced Italian place in town. He'd set the dining room table with the good china, Margaret's mother's Wedgwood, that I'd given Sarah when they moved into the house. Another bad sign. Brian waited until we'd finished eating before clearing his throat. He was handsome in that polished way that always made me slightly uncomfortable, like a salesman who's practiced his smile in the mirror. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his button-down shirt crisp despite the workday. He managed investments at a firm in Hartford, though lately he'd been talking about opportunities that required more capital than they had. "Jack," he began, using my first name as he always did despite my preference otherwise, "we wanted to discuss a financial matter with you." I set down my fork. "Go on." Sarah reached for Brian's hand on the table. Her knuckles were white. "We've found an investment opportunity that's absolutely can't miss. Commercial real estate development in Boston. My firm is putting together a consortium, and I've been offered a chance to buy in." His eyes gleamed with the same excitement I'd seen when he'd talked about cryptocurrency 3 years ago. That venture had cost them nearly $50,000. "How much?" I asked simply. "300,000, Brian replied without hesitation. "The minimum buy-in, but Jack, the projected returns are incredible. We're talking 30% annually minimum." I'd heard similar promises before. "And you're telling me this because—" Sarah jumped in. "Dad, we don't have that kind of liquidity right now. The market's been volatile, and some of our previous investments haven't matured as expected." Translation: they'd lost money on Brian's schemes. We know you've been very conservative with your retirement savings, Brian continued. Your financial advisor has you in those low-yield bonds and index funds. This is a chance to really grow your nest egg while helping us secure our future. The pieces clicked into place. You want me to invest my retirement savings in this venture? Not all of it, Sarah quickly added. Just enough for the buy-in. We'd put it in your name too, of course. I looked between them. My daughter's expression was hopeful, earnest. Brian's was confident, perhaps too much so. I'd need to see the prospectus, talk to my financial advisor. I kept my tone neutral. Brian's smile faltered slightly. The opportunity closes at the end of the week. We don't really have time for all that. Red flag number 1. I'm not comfortable making investment decisions of that magnitude without due diligence, I said. Dad, you always said you trusted us. Sarah's voice had an edge I didn't recognize. This is important to our future, and my retirement savings are important to mine. I set my napkin on the table. I'm not saying no, I'm saying I need more information. Brian leaned forward. Jack, I'm in finance. This is what I do. If I say this is solid, it's solid. Red flag number 2. The conversation deteriorated from there. What began as a discussion became increasingly heated. Sarah mentioned the house, how they'd taken me in when I could have been shipped off to a retirement home. Brian brought up his connections, his expertise, how I was being stubborn and old-fashioned. I remained calm, asking basic questions any responsible investor would ask. Who were the developers? What was the timeline? What were the risks? With each question, Brian grew more defensive and Sarah more agitated. Why can't you just trust us? She finally snapped. Mom would have. The mention of Margaret hit me like a physical blow. Your mother would have asked the same questions I'm asking. You just don't want us to succeed, Brian said, his charm completely evaporated. You've never approved of me. That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. I'd had reservations about Brian from the beginning, his lavish spending, his constant pursuit of get-rich-quick schemes. But I'd kept those concerns largely to myself out of respect for Sarah's choices. I want to see the full investment proposal, I said firmly. If it's as solid as you claim, my financial advisor will confirm that. There isn't time. Brian slammed his hand on the table, making the china rattle. Other investors are lined up. I pulled strings to get us this opportunity. Red flag number 3. Then I'm afraid my answer is no, I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face crumpled, then hardened. Dad, we need this. We've had some financial setbacks. This investment could solve everything. What kind of setbacks? I asked, more silence. Brian and Sarah exchanged glances. Tell him, Brian finally said. He should know what he's doing to us. Sarah took a deep breath. We remortgaged the house last year for one of Brian's investments. Then the market turned. We're 3 months behind on payments. The bank is threatening foreclosure. My stomach dropped. This house, the house I gave you, we had no choice, Brian interjected. It was our only asset with enough equity. And you didn't think to tell me this before now? My voice was dangerously quiet. We thought we could fix it before you ever needed to know, Sarah said, tears forming. But now we're running out of options. So this investment, it's not even about growing my retirement fund. It's about bailing you out of a hole you dug yourselves. Brian's expression turned cold. We're family. Families help each other. Family also doesn't lie to each other, I countered, or use emotional manipulation to access someone's life savings. Is that what you think this is? Sarah's voice rose. After everything we've done for you, what you've done for me, I could feel my temperature rising. I gave you this house, mortgage-free. I moved into the garage apartment to give you privacy. I've contributed to household expenses despite our agreement that I wouldn't need to. And now when we need you, you turn your back. Brian stood up. I told Sarah this would happen. I told her you'd choose your money over her happiness. I looked at my daughter, hoping to see some recognition of the manipulation at play. Instead, I saw anger and disappointment directed at me. I'm not choosing money over happiness, I said carefully. I'm refusing to throw good money after bad without proper information. That's just common sense. It's selfishness, Sarah snapped. Pure selfishness. I stood up, suddenly weary beyond words. I think we should all take some time to cool down. We can discuss this again tomorrow when— There is no tomorrow on this, Dad, Sarah interrupted. The opportunity expires. It's now or never. Then I'm afraid it's never, I said firmly. I won't be pressured into a financial decision of this magnitude. Brian laughed bitterly. Unbelievable. You're really going to let us lose everything when you could easily help. I'm preventing all of us from losing everything, I corrected him, including my ability to support myself in my remaining years. Support yourself? Sarah stood now too. You think that measly pension covers what it costs to keep you here? The extra utilities, the modifications to the apartment, the meals? Each word was like a knife. The apartment conversion had been their idea, their solution to having me close but not too close. I'd paid for the renovations myself. I've contributed more than fairly to this household, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Not enough, Brian shot back. Not nearly enough for what we need now. I looked at my daughter, searching for the little girl who used to run to me with skinned knees and broken toys. Sarah, please, let's think this through rationally. Instead of softening, her expression hardened further. I've made up my mind, Dad. Either you help us with this investment or... Or what? I asked quietly. Or you need to find somewhere else to live. The words hung in the air between us. I felt as though I'd been struck. You'd evict your own father? My voice was barely audible. Don't be dramatic, Brian interjected. We're simply saying that if you're not willing to be part of the solution, you can't continue to be part of the problem. The problem? I repeated. Is that what I am to you now? Sarah's chin trembled, but her voice was firm. We need that money, Dad. It's our only way out of this mess. I looked around the dining room, at the walls I'd painted myself, the crown molding I'd installed by hand, the window seat where I used to read to Sarah on rainy afternoons. This house contained 35 years of memories. Margaret and I had poured our hearts, souls, and every spare penny into it. And now I was being told to get out unless I handed over my life savings. I see. I carefully placed my napkin on the table and stood. I think I need some air. Dad, Sarah began, but I was already walking toward the door. I'll be in my apartment, I said without turning around. We can talk in the morning when everyone's calmer. I heard Brian mutter something as I left, but I didn't catch the words, probably for the best. That night I couldn't sleep. Rain pattered against the skylight Margaret had insisted on installing in the apartment to keep it from feeling like a cave. I lay awake remembering the day we'd moved into this house, Sarah just 5 years old, running from room to room in delight. How Margaret and I had scraped and saved for the down payment, eating ramen noodles for dinner 3 nights a week. The pride we'd felt at providing our daughter with a stable home in a good school district. I thought about the garden Margaret had cultivated in the backyard, the kitchen renovation we'd done for our 20th anniversary, the basement we'd finished when Sarah was in high school so she could have friends over. Every inch of this property held our sweat and dreams, and I'd given it away freely, trusting Sarah to honor that legacy. Around 3 in the morning, I made a decision. I wouldn't be manipulated, but I also wouldn't be evicted from my own home, not without a fight. The next morning, I called in sick to the hardware store for the first time in 5 years and made 3 appointments. One with my financial advisor, one with my lawyer, and one with a real estate agent I knew from church. By the time Sarah knocked on my apartment door that evening, I had a plan. Dad, her voice was conciliatory. Can we talk? I opened the door and gestured for her to come in. The apartment was small but comfortable, a living area with a kitchenette, a bedroom, and a bathroom. All I really needed. Sarah sat on the couch, looking around as if seeing the space for the first time. Maybe she was. I'm sorry about last night, she began. Things got heated. Yes, they did. I remained standing. But we still need an answer about the investment. No real apology then, just a softer approach to the same demand. I spoke with my financial advisor today, I said calmly. He strongly advised against any investment requiring such a quick decision without proper documentation. Sarah's face fell. So it's still no. It's still no to that particular request, I confirmed. But I have an alternative proposal. She looked up, hope flickering across her features. What kind of proposal? I'll help you with your financial situation, but not through this investment scheme of Brian's. It's not a scheme, she protested weakly. Sarah, any legitimate investment opportunity would allow time for due diligence. You know that. She didn't argue further on that point. So what are you proposing? I'll loan you enough to catch up on the mortgage payments as a loan, not a gift, with interest and repayment terms formalized through my lawyer. Her brow furrowed. That doesn't solve the underlying problem. We need investment income. What you need is financial stability, I corrected gently. And that starts with keeping the house while you sort out your other issues. Brian won't agree to a loan, she said immediately. He says we need equity, not more debt. Then Brian needs to come up with a better solution than pressuring his father-in-law for his retirement savings. Sarah's expression hardened again. So that's it, a loan or nothing? Those are my terms, I said firmly. I'm willing to help, but not at the expense of my financial security. She stood abruptly. I'll talk to Brian, but I don't think he'll agree. That's your choice. But Sarah, I caught her eye, the threat to evict me was out of line. This is still legally my home, too. Her cheeks flushed. We were upset. You know we didn't mean it. But I could see in her eyes that they had meant it. At least in the moment. I'd like your answer about the loan by tomorrow, I said. After that, I'll need to make other arrangements. What does that mean? She asked suspiciously. It means I'm not living under threat of eviction. One way or another, this situation will be resolved. After she left, I sat heavily on the couch, feeling every one of my 62 years. The conversation with my lawyer earlier had confirmed what I suspected. The deed transfer I'd executed 3 years ago contained a life estate provision. It had been Margaret's idea, her way of ensuring I would always have a home no matter what. At the time, I'd thought it unnecessary. Now it seemed prescient. The provision meant I had the legal right to live in the property for the remainder of my life, regardless of who owned the deed. Sarah and Brian couldn't evict me, not legally. But I had no desire to live where I wasn't wanted, especially under the current circumstances. My phone rang, Frank from the hardware store checking on me. You never miss work, he said without preamble. You dying or something? Despite everything, I chuckled. Not yet, family situation. The talk didn't go well, huh? You could say that. I gave him the abbreviated version. Frank whistled low. That son-in-law of yours has some nerve. It's Sarah I'm worried about, I admitted. She's completely under his influence. What are you going to do? I'm working on it, I said. But I might need a few more days off. Take what you need, Frank said immediately. And Jack, remember what Margaret always said. Trust but verify, we said in unison. It had been her mantra as an elementary school principal, love your students, but check their homework. The next day passed without word from Sarah or Brian. I used the time to continue my preparations, meeting with the real estate agent to discuss my options for a small condo or apartment nearby. I also visited my bank to review my accounts and ensure everything was in order. Just after dinner, a solitary sandwich eaten at my small table, a text arrived from Sarah. Brian says no to the loan. He has another idea. Dinner tomorrow at 7? I texted back a simple, I'll be there, and continued my evening routine, though my mind was far from the book I pretended to read. The next night's dinner was Chinese takeout this time. Brian seemed almost jovial, which immediately put me on guard. Jack, he began once we were seated, I've been thinking about your concerns and I respect your caution. It's admirable. The compliment felt hollow. So I've come up with a compromise, he continued. Instead of asking you to invest in the Boston project, what if we refinance this house? With your name on the application, we'd get a much better interest rate, and we could pull out enough equity to catch up on the current mortgage and have some working capital left over. I took a slow sip of water. So you want me to co-sign a new mortgage on the house I already gave you? It makes the most sense, Brian nodded enthusiastically. You're still living here after all. You have a stake in making sure we keep the property. And what happens if you can't make the payments on this new mortgage? I asked. Brian waved dismissively. That won't happen. With the pressure of the current situation resolved, we'll be in a much better position. Dad, Sarah added, it's really the best solution. You wouldn't have to touch your retirement savings, and we'd get the breathing room we need. I set down my fork. Let me make sure I understand. You want me, at 62 years old, to take on joint responsibility for a new mortgage on this house. A mortgage that would be larger than the one you're currently unable to pay. When you put it that way, it sounds negative, Brian frowned. I'm trying to find a win-win here. The only win I see is for you, I said bluntly. You get access to more money with none of the accountability a personal loan would require. Sarah's expression darkened. So that's another no. It's another no, I confirmed. Brian's friendly demeanor vanished. Then I don't know what to tell you, Jack. We can't afford to keep this house without help, and you're refusing to help. I offered help, I reminded him. A structured loan to catch up on the payments. That just kicks the can down the road, Brian's voice rose. We need a real solution. A real solution would be living within your means, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Selling the luxury cars, cutting up the credit cards, getting your spending under control. Don't lecture us about finances, Sarah snapped. You have no idea the pressures we're under. I raised a child as a single-income household in this very house, I reminded her. Your mother and I managed just fine without remortgaging our future. Times were different then, Brian dismissed. The economy, the job market, everything's harder now. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The designer clothes, the manicured nails, the expensive jewelry, signs of a lifestyle that even in my best earning years I couldn't have afforded. I think we've reached an impasse, I said quietly. So what now? Sarah demanded. You just sit in your apartment while we lose the house around you? No, I shook my head. I'll be moving out next week. That caught them both by surprise. Moving out, Sarah repeated. To where? I've found a small condo about 20 minutes from here. One bedroom, all I need really. The offer was accepted yesterday. You're buying a condo? Brian looked stunned. Just like that. Just like that, I confirmed. The money I'd set aside for your loan will cover the down payment nicely. But, but what about us? Sarah's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like panic. What about the house? That will be up to you and Brian to figure out, I said. I've done what I can. You haven't done anything, Brian exploded, except abandon your family when we needed you most. I felt a surge of anger but kept my voice level. I offered a solution. You rejected it. I'm not obligated to comply with your demands, especially when they would put my own future at risk. So you're just leaving? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. After everything, I'm removing myself from an untenable situation, I corrected. And frankly, after being threatened with eviction from my own home, I think it's the best decision for everyone. We didn't mean that, Sarah protested weakly. Didn't you? I looked between them. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like I'm only welcome in this house as long as I'm financially useful to you. That's not fair, she whispered. None of this is fair, I agreed. But it's the reality we're facing. Brian stood abruptly. Fine, go, buy your condo, abandon your family, but don't come crawling back when you realize how lonely life is without us. With that, he stormed out of the dining room. Sarah remained seated, tears streaming down her face. Dad, please, she pleaded. We can figure something out. I've tried, Sarah, I really have, but I won't be manipulated or threatened. Not even by you. It's not manipulation to ask for help, she insisted. No, but it is manipulation to issue ultimatums and make threats when that help doesn't come in exactly the form you want. I stood up. I love you, Sarah. That will never change. But I can't support the path you and Brian are on. I left her sitting there, walked back to my apartment, and closed the door behind me. The next few days passed in a fog of activity, finalizing the condo purchase, arranging movers, sorting through my belongings. Sarah made several attempts to change my mind, each more desperate than the last. Brian vacillated between cold silence and angry outbursts. Through it all, I maintained my resolve. The life estate provision in the deed meant I could have forced the issue and stayed, but that would only prolong the inevitable confrontation. Better to make a clean break. The day before my scheduled move, Sarah came to the apartment one last time. She looked tired, defeated. I can't believe you're really leaving, she said, watching as I packed books into a box. I think it's for the best, I replied. What will we do about the house? She asked quietly. That's not my decision anymore, I said, but if you want my advice, sell it before the bank forecloses. Use whatever equity is left to start fresh, preferably with a budget this time. She flinched at that. Brian says selling would be admitting defeat. Sometimes retreat is the wisest strategy, I said, thinking of Margaret's battle with cancer. How she'd known when to fight and when to focus on quality over quantity. I don't want you to go, Sarah admitted. Despite everything, I paused in my packing. I don't want to go either. But I can't stay where I'm not respected. Is that what you think, that we don't respect you? Actions speak louder than words, Sarah, and your actions, both of yours, have made it clear how you see me. She had no response to that. As she turned to leave, I called after her. Sarah, there's something you should know. She paused at the door, not turning around. The life estate provision in the deed. It gives me the legal right to remain here for the rest of my life, regardless of who owns the property. Now she did turn, shock evident on her face. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm choosing to leave, not being forced out, remember that. Her expression cycled through confusion, realization, and something approaching shame. Without another word, she left. The next day, the movers came. I supervised as they loaded my belongings, furniture from the apartment, boxes of books and mementos, Margaret's hope chest that I'd kept in the basement. The grandfather clock that had been her father's stood wrapped in blankets on the truck. As I did a final walkthrough of the apartment, Sarah appeared in the doorway. "I thought you'd already left," she said. "Just making sure I didn't forget anything." I glanced around the empty space, memories flooding back. Margaret helping me install the ceiling fan. Sarah bringing me soup when I had the flu last winter. Simple moments of family life now relegated to the past. "Dad, she hesitated. "I'm sorry for everything." I nodded, accepting the apology without comment. "Will you at least give us your new address?" she asked. "For Christmas cards and such. Frank at the hardware store knows how to reach me," I said. "When you're ready, really ready to talk, he can help." Her face crumpled. "So that's it? You're cutting us off completely?" "No, Sarah. I'm giving us all space to reevaluate, me included." I picked up my last bag. "I love you, never doubt that, but love doesn't mean enabling behavior that hurts everyone involved." I walked past her to my car, feeling her eyes on my back. I didn't look back as I drove away from the house I'd built with my own hands, the home where I'd raised my daughter and lost my wife. It felt like an ending, but as I pulled into the parking lot of my new condo building, I realized it could also be a beginning. The condo was small but bright, with large windows overlooking a community garden. Modern fixtures, an open floor plan, nothing like the colonial warmth of my old home. But it was mine, free and clear from manipulation or threat. As I began to unpack, my phone rang. It was Frank. "All moved in?" he asked. "Getting there," I replied, setting Margaret's photo on the mantel of the electric fireplace. "Good. Listen, I thought you should know. Sarah came by the store today." My heart skipped. What did she want? Information. About mortgages, finances, legal stuff. She had a lot of questions. "Did you tell her anything?" "Only what she needed to hear. That her father is a man of principle who deserves better than what she and that husband of hers dished out." I sighed. "Frank, I know, not my place, but someone had to say it." He paused. "She cried, Jack." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that information. "Did she say anything else?" "She asked if I thought you'd ever forgive her." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that wasn't the right question. The right question is whether she's ready to make changes that would warrant forgiveness." Despite everything, I smiled. Frank had always had a way of cutting to the heart of matters. "Thanks, Frank." "Don't mention it." "Now when are you coming back to work? These screws aren't going to stock themselves." The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment. The condo slowly became home. I returned to my schedule at the hardware store. Life developed a new rhythm, quieter but not unhappy. I heard nothing from Sarah or Brian directly, but Hartford is a small city. Word reached me through mutual acquaintances that they had indeed put the house on the market, that they were looking at apartments in a more modest part of town, that Brian had taken a second job on weekends. Small steps, perhaps, but steps nonetheless. 2 months after I'd moved out, Sarah appeared at the hardware store on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She looked different, simpler somehow, with less makeup and her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The Cartier watch was noticeably absent. "Hi, Dad," she said tentatively, approaching the counter where I was inventorying pipe fittings. "Sarah," I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. "How are you?" "Managing." She twisted her hands together, a nervous habit from childhood. "We sold the house, got just enough to pay off the mortgage and break even." "That's good," I said. "A fresh start." "Yeah." She looked around the store, then back at me. "We're in an apartment now, nothing fancy, but it works for us." I waited, sensing there was more. "Brian and I," she hesitated, "we're in counseling. Financial and marriage. His spending was out of control for a long time, mine too, if I'm being honest." "I'm glad you're getting help," I said sincerely. "It was your leaving that did it," she admitted. "Made us look at ourselves, at what we'd become, how we'd treated you." She blinked rapidly. "I'm so ashamed, Dad." I set down my clipboard. "Sarah, I didn't leave to punish you." "I know that now." "You left because you had to?" She wiped at her eyes. "Because we gave you no choice." I reached across the counter and took her hand. We all make mistakes, sweetheart. Some bigger than others, she attempted a smile. Brian won't admit it yet, but that investment, it was a scam. His inside contact disappeared the day after we last spoke to you. 3 other guys from his firm lost everything. I squeezed her hand but said nothing. What was there to say? I'd suspected as much. Anyway, she straightened, visibly gathering herself. I didn't come here to dump all this on you. I came to invite you to dinner. Our place this time, nothing fancy, just family dinner. If you want. I studied my daughter's face, the face so like her mother's, now showing the first signs of lines around the eyes and mouth. Lines earned through living, through mistakes and hopefully learning. I'd like that, I said. Her smile was genuine this time. Great, is Friday good around 6? Friday at 6, I confirmed. I'll bring dessert. As she turned to leave, she paused. Dad, thank you for not giving in, for being stronger than we were. After she left, Frank emerged from the back room. Couldn't help overhearing, he said, not looking the least bit apologetic for eavesdropping. Of course you couldn't, I said dryly. You going to be okay, with dinner and all? I considered the question. I think so, it's a start. Just remember what Margaret used to say about second chances, Frank advised. They're earned, not given, I quoted. Exactly, he clapped me on the shoulder. Now finish those pipe fittings. Some of us are trying to run a business here. Friday arrived cool and clear. I stood outside the apartment building where Sarah and Brian now lived, a modest complex on the outskirts of town. Nothing like the grand colonial they'd lost, but clean and well-maintained. I clutched the apple pie I'd brought, store-bought, as baking had always been Margaret's domain, not mine. For a moment, I considered turning around, going back to my quiet condo with its predictable peace. But that wasn't the path forward. Sarah answered the door on the first knock, her face lighting up with a smile that reminded me of her childhood excitement on Christmas mornings. Dad, you came. She hugged me, then stepped back to let me in. Come in, please. The apartment was small but tidy. Basic furniture, no luxury items in sight. A far cry from the designer decor of the house, but there was something honest about it. Real. Brian emerged from what I assumed was the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked different too, hair less perfectly styled, clothes more casual. The confidence was still there, but tempered now with something approaching humility. Jack, he nodded. Thanks for coming. There was an awkward moment where none of us seemed to know what to do next. Then Brian stepped forward, hand extended. I owe you an apology, he said simply. What we did, what I pushed for, was wrong. On every level. I took his hand, feeling the firm grip of a man finally facing reality. Apology accepted, I said, and surprisingly I meant it. Dinner was simple, baked chicken, roasted vegetables, nothing extravagant. The conversation was cautious at first, all of us navigating this new territory. But gradually, the stiffness eased. Sarah talked about her promotion at work. Brian mentioned his weekend job coaching a youth soccer team, volunteer work, he emphasized, but fulfilling. They were budgeting now, saving what they could, small steps toward financial responsibility. As we finished the apple pie, Brian cleared his throat. Jack, there's something else we wanted to discuss with you. I tensed slightly, old wariness resurfacing. It's not about money, Sarah quickly added, seeing my expression. It's about family, Brian nodded. We've been doing a lot of thinking these past months about what matters, about the kind of people we want to be. And, I prompted when he paused, and we'd like to start rebuilding, Sarah said. If you're willing, Sunday dinners maybe, holidays. Regular family time. We know it will take time, Brian added. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, but we'd like to try. I looked between them, seeing genuine contrition, genuine desire for reconciliation. Margaret would have given them that chance, I knew. She always believed in redemption. I'd like that too, I said finally. One step at a time. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. That's all we're asking for. A chance. As I drove home later that night, I thought about second chances and new beginnings. About the lessons learned through pain and the wisdom gained through loss. About Margaret, who would have handled all of this with more grace than I had, but who would have approved of the outcome nonetheless. The path forward wouldn't be perfectly smooth, real relationships never are, but it would be honest, built on mutual respect rather than exploitation, on love rather than leverage. And perhaps, in the end, that was the greatest legacy I could leave my daughter. Not a house or money or material possessions, but the understanding that true wealth lies in integrity, in standing firm when it matters, in forgiveness that follows genuine change. I pulled into my condo parking lot, looking up at the windows of my new home. It wasn't the house where Sarah had grown up. It didn't hold decades of memories within its walls, but it represented something just as valuable: self-respect, boundaries, the courage to start again even at 62. As I unlocked my door, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Thank you for tonight. It meant the world to us." "Love you, Dad," I smiled and typed back. "Love you too. Always have, always will." Some lessons come at a high price, but if they lead to growth, to healing, to restoration, perhaps they're worth it after all. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.